Everyone, thanks, Wendy. Honored to be here today, and thank you for the FOSSASIA team for inviting me. This is going to be a 25-minute talk, but it's actually engineered to be 45 minutes. So I'm going to rush through a lot of things here. I also can't see my slides, so I'm going to look and see where we are. But anyway, so my name is Péter Farkas, as Wendy introduced me. I'm from Budapest, Hungary, and I mainly worked at database or data related companies in the past, like Percona or Cloudera, or now FerretDB, which is MongoDB replacement based on Postgres. We are an alternative to MongoDB, and we turn Postgres into a MongoDB compatible database. But today's talk is going to be well, first of all, what is a strategic advantage? I think we need to talk a bit about that, because otherwise the title of the slide or the talk will not make a lot of sense. So what is a strategic advantage? We will talk about migrations and the importance of choosing wisely. We also have a couple of case studies. I will probably rush through those. And we also will cover how to choose a database wisely in case you are in search for one. So let's start. So what are the drivers of strategic advantage, or what is strategic advantage? Strategic advantage is your edge against your competitors. Who are you? Who are you working at a startup company? Raise your hands. Okay, large corporations, large evil corporations. No hands. Maybe there's some overlap. Just joking. So, yes, strategic advantage is your edge. Ahead of your competitors. First, you should have a unique value proposition. A unique value proposition is when you have functionality or a service which only you provide to your users. So something which makes you unique from the feature perspective. Second would be cost leadership. This is pretty self-explanatory. When you're cheaper for the specific use case you're providing than any other competitor. Innovation and adaptability. When you're agile enough to make changes on the fly, to introduce new features easily, easier compared to your competitors. And for startups, this is probably your only advantage when it comes to large corporations and competing with them. Brand strength. So you use your technologies based on features, based on how it fits your workload, but really it also strengthens or weakens your brand if you choose wisely or poorly. And what I mean by that is you have a brand you need to protect, and if the underlying technology is unreliable, your users will not like your brand, and that is going to make your life harder when it comes to competition. And operational efficiency. So the technology, and in this case the database you're choosing, is going to determine how efficient you can be when it comes to your day-to-day operations. If you choose a proprietary vendor with a support subscription and they take ages to respond to your queries, versus if you have an in-house team for open source software or some other arrangement, that can very well make your life easier or harder on our day-to-day operations. On the other hand, if you choose wisely and you're efficient in terms of operations, then you have an edge over your competitors. So in the United States and increasingly in Europe, I'm not sure about Asia in general, there is this thing called storage providers. like physical storage providers where you have your bicycle or the grandma's couch or whatever else you should get rid of, but you for some reason don't. And then you can just go and take those into a storage facility and store there for a monthly subscription. Usually it's free to move in and your first month is free. And then later on they will charge you per month to store the things which you actually don't really need, but you are afraid to get rid of them. The interesting thing about this is that it's an analogy to cloud-based databases where you get lots of free credits, like let's say you have 250K free credits from AWS or Google or wherever else, and you start storing data in their cloud-based service, and then it's very hard to move out. Why? Because it's already there. So first of all, it's psychological. If you chose a database and your data is there and it works, then you're less inclined to migrate. Migrations are actually pretty hard, not just from a technical perspective, but also because of several other reasons. There's the sunk cost fallacy. Oh, we already paid the solutions architect and the engineers to set ourselves up on the cloud-based solution. That money would be wasted if we would move out. Okay, that's not my slide. But let me move on while this gets fixed. Yes, thank you. So emotional attachment. Many would laugh when they see this slide and this statement that some people are emotionally attached to technologies and databases. Well, you see people in Postgres t-shirts. You see people in MySQL t-shirts. Maybe some crazy people would be wearing Oracle t-shirts, but it's a thing. So it worked for us. We've been working with it for 20 years. Even if something else would make sense, even if our current solution keeps us from having a competitive edge, a strategic advantage, we are not going to change, we are not going to migrate. And migrations are also risky to manage for executive. So imagine the CTO who just joined a large corporation and they have Oracle and it kind of works, they are paying a lot of money, but it's already budgeted for. And who in their right mind as a new CTO would want to manage the database migration project? It's probably the riskiest thing he or she can do, right? So usually these decisions are not just technological, but also a result of risk analysis, psychology, and the like. Trends. So on this slide, you can see that Postgres is overtaking all the other database technologies out there. This is the Stack Exchange Developer Survey of 2023. And Postgres takes the first place, I think, not for the first time in 2023. Maybe it was the first in 2022 as well, but it was definitely not the top one database before that. And then we have MySQL, SQLite, MongoDB, and Microsoft SQL Server. So there are some outliers on this graph. You can see that the three databases in the top three positions are all open source. Then there's MongoDB and Microsoft SQL Server, and only one of them is a database which used to be open source, and that is MongoDB. And that's my pet peeve because at FaraDB we are dealing with MongoDB. So apparently, users are right, and they do the right thing by choosing open source databases. In fact, if you look at the DB Engine's popularity trend, you can see that open source databases are on the same ranking in terms of usage as proprietary ones. Now, DB engines have some weird definitions of open source sometimes. Usually, databases which are not open source may make it to the open source category, but nevertheless, the trend is pretty clear. For the last 10 years, open source is catching up with the proprietary. There is this case study. I worked at 4 different companies, and I had the same airline as a customer. And for those 4 or 5 years, they've been trying to get rid of an Oracle-based solution, which showcases that it's indeed very hard to migrate from something which you chose years ago without really looking what you're getting into. There are some details I will not go into because of the lack of time, but as you can see, it took them 4 years to move from Oracle to Postgres and actually have the cost savings they were looking for. So I mentioned cost savings, but it's actually not just about cost saving when you choose open source. So open source tends to be a lot more transparent. You have access to the source code. You can work with people who can provide you the flexibility to introduce features for your specific use case or to better support your specific use case. And it's also community-led, meaning that innovations would very frequently appear in open source first and then move to proprietary, at least in the majority of cases. In terms of transparency, it's a very funny thing, like search for an Oracle database benchmark and you will realize that there's none, because actually Oracle license prohibits you from running and publishing a benchmark. So there's that as well. I'm giving a lot of crap to Oracle, but it's actually just for the purpose of comparing. On this slide, I think I mentioned most of things, but the point of this presentation is, okay, we established that open source is the thing. We are sitting on an open source conference. I think we know that open source is great. But still, throughout my career, I've seen people, I've seen customers who chose open source just because there was open source written on it. So it's an open source database. It should be good, right? Well, most of the time, yes, but there is one often overlooked thing, and that is whether it is based on an open standard or not. So there are open source databases out there which are released as open source, but they don't follow any open standard, meaning that it's likely that there's only one provider which exists for that specific technology. And in that case, open source will not help you to reduce your vendor lock-in risk. So what to look for when you choose an open source database? First of all, the size of the community. I would say that is one very important factor. You look at GitHub, you see that there's activity with releases, you see that there's an engaged community. I would also look for whether the contributors are from the same company or not, because if they are, then it's likely that if that company decreases its support for the open source project, then you will end up with a dead community. License. So I don't want to start a war here. We all have our favorite licenses. Some would say it's AGPL or Apache or MIT or whatever else. I would say the important thing would be to choose an OSI recognized license. BSL, SSPL, and all these things, will not give you the same freedoms as proper open source licenses. And there are some other factors as well, like whether you have a choice of different service providers. So is there competition for your business with that technology? If there's only one provider, it's likely that there's none. And you will be paying more for the same service. I mentioned open standards and open source. Who knows what is the difference, or who knew what is the difference between the two? Hands, please. Yes, so open standards are the blueprint. And when it comes to relational databases or SQL, there is a paper which describes how the SQL query language should behave. How should the queries look like? How should the results be returned? And Postgres and SQLite and MySQL and most relational databases would follow that. Now imagine this shiny new database. Again, MongoDB at some point was one of them, or there are some special databases out there for time series or vector or whatever else. Yes, they are very fast. Yes, they are very new. Yes, they are very innovative, but there's no open standard behind them. So there are no standards organizations like the ISO or the W3C, which would actually get vendors together and work on the standard to make sure that the experience would be similar across different alternatives. With SQL, most relational databases would at least give you similar results if you use your knowledge across them on how to query them, on how to build an application for a relational database. In the case of MongoDB, for example, we have alternatives like FerretDB, like Amazon DocumentDB, and some others, but there's no standard, meaning that you have almost zero chance to work across the board. So open standards and not open source is the power behind interoperability, power behind your ability to migrate, and the power behind your freedom of choice. If you only choose your technology based on the license, that will not be enough to save you from trouble. There's actually a full version of this talk. This is just a 25-minute talk. There's a full version of talk where I go over the case study on the history of SQL, on how SQL came to be, on how they came up with the relational concept. How IBM logged in relational database users to their systems. You had to lease one of these washing machine-sized computers to actually be able to use the product. I mean, this looks like an old picture, but you do the same on cloud providers, right? You lease somebody else's machine and you can only use the stuff there in many situations. So if you liked SQL, you had to use IBM, and then there were alternatives, and then it became a standard, and that was the start of our current world where there are a lot of alternatives for relational databases. And my example is always MongoDB, which started out as open source, had no open standard behind it. Alternatives appeared, and they appear even today, and there's no chance to migrate between these. And you know, this is a history repeats itself kind of situation where MongoDB users did the right thing by choosing an open source database, but ended up dealing with a vendor lock-in when MongoDB changed their license because there were no compatible alternatives out there. And this is my example on how you can choose open source and still get into a vendor lock-in situation. To alleviate this, we started the OpenDocDB initiative, where we are working on standardizing MongoDB as an open standard, and we create a similar paper which describes how a MongoDB compatible database should behave. I think these slides will be available, so FerretDB, I'm not going to talk much about it, is an alternative to MongoDB. It's written in Go, it's Apache 2.0, and if you run Postgres, you install FerretDB and you have a MongoDB compatible database. So if you run both, then make sure to check it out. So all in all, as a conclusion, again, we are here in an open source conference. I don't think I have to sell open source to you. I wanted to introduce some other factors which you would need to consider when choosing a database. I hope I was able to provide you some more perspective in doing that. If you were not familiar with the importance of open standards, I invite you to dig into it a bit more. With that, thank you very much for your attention today, and let me know if you have any questions.